Hi everyone, I'm Adele Lewis, a community manager here at Reliably. As I mentioned earlier, it'd be great to see who we have joining today, so feel free to pop in the chat where you're joining us from and say hello. In the demo today, we're going to walk you through how to apply Reliably and go through some of its features like creating objectives, aggregating a reliability score and verifying them with chaos engineering, as well as setting up smart alerts. If you have any questions during the demo, you can ping them into the chat box, which you'll find, I think, on the right-hand side of your screen, or you can ask them at the end. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A. So now I'm going to hand over to Sylvain, co-founder and CTO of Reliably, to begin the demo. Sylvain, over to you.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for making your lunch break with us. I don't know if lunch breaks are better to hand over to companies like us or evenings, but I hope that it's not going to be too bad for you. You're not going to feel, crap, I could have used that and walk the sun. But I'll do my best to keep you entertained or at least interested remotely. So we are Reliably. We are a small company in Europe for once, hence the time of day, I guess. We're basically passionate about the sustainability of teams. In our view, our worlds have become more and more complex, not just the outside world, but our systems. And when I say systems, basically it goes from org to dealing with technical, bits and pieces. And, we think that teams have more and more on their shoulders, not just responsibilities, but accountabilities as well. And sometimes you've got system working, A-OK. Everything is fine from the user's perspective, but teams are running and they're on fire because, legacy, because all those things that we go through on a daily basis, right? And that's not necessarily as sustainable as one would want. But bizarrely enough, it's something that, is not, I would say measured, but perhaps not taken care of, not surfaced enough, in my opinion. I think where we reliably sits is in all that big arch that started with, being agile, not talking about Scrum here, being agile, the DevOps culture, all those things that we've decided to take on board to say, okay, we need to act better, for ourselves first and foremost, and hopefully for our users as well. So all the things we put in place, automation, all those, nice things, they have the positive aspect of making our life easier on some aspect, communication, and repeatability. All those things are great. But bizarrely enough, they also make our life more complicated because now we don't just have to code on the product to deliver. We also have to code on the things we do for ourselves. And therefore, we have more work on a daily basis. So all of that makes sometimes difficult for the outside world to figure out why is it so slow? Why is it so, this or that? Well, because we have so much to do, right? Because it's so complex. It's fun, it's exciting, but can be also overwhelming. And at the worst case scenario, it can lead us to burning out or at least being very anxious about, even doing our job, really. So it's a bit of a dual face here, dual coin, where we have the greatness of all the tooling that we have, but at the same time, it's more and more complexity to deal with. Reliably is not here to alleviate completely that, but I think what we realized was in recent years, two things have come about that are quite important. Security is now much more streamlined. Tools like Snyk, product like Snyk are making things very very, very handy for engineers on the, from the beginning, on the left side of the pipeline, to also start getting an understanding of what they need to do better, obviously. And one aspect that goes in hand with security to us is reliability. Now, reliability to me, anyway, and to Reliably is not just, a system being available or this, or basically, robust or, stable. To us, reliability is really sustainability of teams, the good health of teams. You can't do a good job. You can't deliver a great user experience if you're feeling completely drained and always burned out. So reliability is reliability of the system, and therefore you as individuals, but your team as well. That's where it starts, and that's where Reliably sits, really. So today, what I'm going to try to demonstrate is how we envision that with our tooling. The product itself is not, has a lot of features to come. So what I'm going to show are the core features that, to us, everything sits on from, right? So without further ado, what I'll try is, well, showcase that to you, obviously. All right, so Reliably.com is where you'll start. If you want to get registered or signing, this is where you start. Obviously, at the top, you've got the links. So the website will explain a lot more about our philosophy and where we sit in everything that I've just said. But let's go to the product immediately. So when you register with Reliably, for now we only support both through GitHub and GitLab, but let us know if you support like things like Okta or other SAML, or it's good to know what people use, obviously. But when you do register and when you arrive, you've got that dashboard. Now you'd feel, yet another dashboard. Bah. Dashboards are to us, we use that place for a central view, right? We don't think you need to come there on a daily basis. That's not the point. We don't want you to come to the UI on a daily basis. That's not the point at all. We want you to benefit from the data that we're going to send you back, and what we can do is Reliably all the way back to your pipelines, because that's what matters. You do the job you need to do. Having you to come on a daily basis here is pointless for everyone. However, it exists because it helps understand some concept and sometimes visualize things in a better way than you could anywhere else. So when you arrive, what we realized was, okay, what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about a three concepts that work hand in hand together. We've got the objectives, we've got a way to communicate we call alerts, but they're more generally a notification, and then we've got the verification. Objectives are the core central thing. If you come from an SRE background, or if you're interested in that, it's a loose approach to SLO and SRE. It's not by the book. The reason we don't want to do by the book, because you're not Google and neither are we. Nobody is your organization, nobody is another organization. So what works on an org might not work well on a different org, but it doesn't mean the concept itself is not relevant. So we drilled down, we distilled, to what we call objectives, which are essentially SLOs. But to do that, what we realized was, how do we get started? What is a good SLO, right? It comes from also chaos engineering, where people used to ask us, what is a good experiment to start with? So what we decided to do was to get you bootstrapped, right? We decided to make it a little bit easier for you to get started. Here you see a bunch of providers. We'll have more, but we decided to work on those for now. That will create objectives from resources in those providers for you. They're not necessarily objectives you need to keep. You can decide they are not relevant to you, but that will get you bootstrapped very quickly. So for example, we have we've got AWS and all those, all those ones. Let's say I click on the Kubernetes one, we see that it's one command away. So basically, by populating Kubernetes here, what we do is we look at your Kubernetes cluster that you give us, and we look at some resources there. Again, we're not all the resources. We support deployment service and pods for now, but we can support more. And we create a bunch of objectives and, if need be, alerts for now, and soon a verification at once. So once you've run that command, you've got a bunch of objectives, alerts, and verification all at once, ready for you to go and play with. The point here is to get you bootstrapped. It's not to say we decide what the good objectives are for you. You can delete them, you can change, you can do whatever you want. But it's an easy way to get started, in our opinion. So I'll go and do that immediately. So I hope, because my screen is maybe too big, so if you can't see, let me know. I can try to increase perhaps too much. So what I do is I run this command and see what happens. So it asks me which ones I want to support. So I'm going to support for now just deployment services, because I've got a bunch of pods. I don't want to create too many resources. It goes and do it. In this case, for Kubernetes, it goes and talk to your Prometheus if you have one running, and goes and find a bunch of resources that you have in this case. So when we come back here, we we see now that we created a bunch of resources. Interestingly, like I said, the dashboard, at least I don't want you to come on a daily basis here. So it's not the most interesting screen. Here now, it gets more interesting because we see the objectives we created for you. And those objectives are, based on deployments and services, like I said. So what we see is, for example, the first one, it's a provider Kubernetes. We set an objective, not too harsh. Nobody wants a 999, on day one. It's not sustainable again. So we're fairly loose, but you can change that later on. And on a window of 5 minutes. So if I click on this one, no data. Obviously, I haven't, populated that, or I've just created the objective, and we see what it links to. With that said, so the network here, I'll come back later. With that said, what we see is now we probably want to have data coming in. And I'll explain why all of that, because obviously here I'm going fast to what you can do, but I'll explain why we do that. So what I do is I run the agent. It's another command of, maybe it's not as big. There you go. And I'm going to run that just for that service that for that objective that we see. I don't want to go and fetch data for all of it. Now, if we come back here, what we can see is we're using basically this Prometheus query that we created to go and talk to Prometheus and say, okay, what is the status for that specific resource? And now if we run that, basically we start seeing data. So we have the indicator we populate, we got, and then we've got a result that's above the threshold. Great. At that stage, now you've got an objective and you've got something feeding into that. And that's basically the gist of how you keep sustainable through Reliably, at least how we empower you, we hope, to make decisions accordingly. Because objectives are, what I didn't talk about is objectives are a thing you want to discuss with your team. That's a core thing. Right now, we automate it just to get you bootstrap. But really what we want is you as a team, and not individuals. I'm really keen on that, on teams. You as a team, what you want is to sit down and say, okay, what sustainable, what healthy good looks like for us? How do we communicate to the rest of the organization that we're not doing well, that we're overwhelmed, that something is not as good as it should be, and therefore we can't deliver what we usually deliver? Because it's all good, your system is running up and down and everything. But if you have a long list of bugs, maybe you can't take more features. If you have, there are plenty of things like that you need to know about. Again, reliability comes from teams being healthy in a non-burnout state, if you will. Because if you are in that, close to that, you can't sustain it. You can't sustain the work that you're being asked to deliver. So what we're doing here with objectives is you need to sit down as a team and say, how do we communicate that? What are the good objectives that we think are going to say to us, we're not doing good. We know we're not doing good here. Or to others, you need to pay attention, right? Because first of all, in some organizations, only hard data like that actually gets heard. And fortunately, sometimes you need those hard evidence to say, look, these are, the objectives we've set, and they're impacted because of the X or Y. And better or worse, in some organizations, you need that sort of data, that metric to be heard, to be honest. So at that stage, what you've done is you've created a bunch of objects. We created some, you can create more, and that's how it works. But what do you do with those objectives? If that's all you have, yeah, sure, you see data, but at the end of the day, it's not really, very powerful. So what we can do now is we have two ways. Like I said earlier, you have objectives to set your expectations, or the way you are healthy. You feel you are healthy and you can sustain that workload, right? That's objective. Alerts are a way for you to communicate whether or not you're in that good state. So we call that alert, but generally speaking, it's basically a way for you to communicate out to whoever, yourself obviously, but everyone else, that you're not doing well. And then you've got the verifications, which are a way for you to proactively, and this is where chaos engineering comes back into the mix for people who started with Chaos Toolkit. We'll see that later on. You come back and verify that under certain conditions that you feel like are common or risky for you, you can try and see how they impact your objectives and therefore your sustainability, because that's what we are talking about here. So we're going to set up a channel where we're going to send our data. So we're going to do that. See, I call that predictability. It has nothing to do with predictability. It's my test, and I like to think big. So let's call test, doesn't matter. So we're going to send that to an org that I've already integrated with on the workspace I've integrated with. So we create the channel, and now we'll send some messages there when we're not doing well. We're going to create an alert policy, and we're going to take that service demo, and I'll come back to why later, because that's the one I'm going to demo the most. I'm applying that. I'm going to, obviously set that. I'm going to set service disappeared, DAC, and default here to use a default renderer. So what we have now is a way for us to communicate back. So we created objectives to define what good looks like for us. How do we sustain ourselves? How do we not burn out? How do we communicate that? How do we deal with that? Obviously, it goes well beyond. It's also for you to set a latency or whatever objectives you can think of. Then we've decided to create channels of communication for us, essentially in this demo, but you could send that to elsewhere as well. It doesn't do anything. For now, you don't have any alerts because nothing is running. How do you do that? Well, either we wait for something to happen on that service, but it's not going to happen on its own, or what we're going to do is create a verification. And the verification, like I said, is a way for you to proactively go and explore some rough ideas of what conditions could actually impact you. So we're going to create a verification. I'm going to do that with the UI, but you can do that from the CLI as well. And to do that, I'm going to say demo needs to be reachable at all times. So something like all times means a lot of nines. So it's probably crazy, but it's just a demo. So I create the verification. Now, a verification here, you're not seeing a lot. A verification underneath is simply a Chaos Toolkit experiment. And we're not going to go and see what it looks like. So I'm take this long command line. And so our agent is still running. I'm going to look, because my demo is running in my local cluster Kubernetes, I've got service there, and that's what I'm going to impact. So the demo here is fairly trivial. So we're going to run that, and hopefully that will run. There you go. For those who've done Chaos Toolkit, will recognize, obviously, the output because we're running Chaos Toolkit. So verification is a Chaos Toolkit experiment, and I'd say vice versa. Your Chaos Toolkit experiments are verification in our systems. So nothing happened. So our objective is still, our indicators are still 100%, and our service is still there. Why? Because for now, the verification doesn't do anything on its own except check that things are great. What we're going to work on in the next future very soon is basically create full ready a variety of verification for you. So they'll contain as well the condition that you might want to try. For now, you have to do that manually, which is okay because it's not that complicated. That one is for later. So there you go. So we've got, I'm going to download that verification. Oh, there you go. So this is what it looks like. Now, if you've never done Chaos Toolkit, I'll briefly explain. If you have, hopefully I'm not going to say any nonsense. So a Chaos Toolkit experiment is just a file describing three blocks that are important. One is your steady state, which basically defines what good looks like. It's good, we have that, it's called objectives, right? There is a strong mapping between your SRE, SLO sort of objectives and a chaos engineering experiment expectations. So we're using that. That's where it is. And we're saying that objective we just created a verification for needs to be good, needs to work, basically. The tolerance is true, which means basically the service level objective, the objective is met. It's above its 95% target. But as you see, the method is not doing anything. That's the second block. The second block is what I'm going to do to the system to check that it impacts or not that objective, right? and it's empty. That's the thing we're going to explore to build for you automatically in the future, a variety of them. And then we've got rollbacks that may or may not be used. I'll leave that for now, but we're going to use later. So let's do that. Let's take a method. Sorry for the copy paste, and I'll go briefly through that. So what we do here, I'll move to try. It's not useful. What we have as a method is basically we're going to delete the service because that's what we're looking at, being reachable. And I know it's untrivial, but configuration are one of the biggest things to to fail all the time on systems. So it's not actually that trivial. So here we have a service that if we delete it, what happens, right? Obviously, I know in Kubernetes you would be able to set, probably some access control so that a user can't do that. But let's assume it's not there yet. It's a remediation more than anything else in many places. So what we're going to do here is simply say we're going to delete that service, and we use a rollback to say we're going to create it back again. Here it's called demo actually, so we're going to use that. Now we've got an experiment that is complete, right? But a chaos engineering experiment, if you're using Chaos Toolkit, is a regular experiment. So we can actually extend that and bring bits and pieces. So for example, we're going to also ask the experiment to send messages to Slack when we run it. Why not? Right? Why not? Verification here. So it's a regular verification like any a regular experiment like anything else. And now we're going to run that, but because we've got the file, we're going to use the file itself instead of the URL. All right, pay attention to the right here. In theory, unless I've obviously broken something, the service should be gone. All right, so we see our service is gone here, which basically means the experiment has done what it was supposed to do. And hopefully, the next time the agent runs, it should take a different value here. And now it's 0. And this objective is a bit binary. Obviously, it's not smooth like a latency or something like that. But it was mostly for the purpose of this demo as well. So that's good because now we have, obviously we've proven that we can impact the service. What happens after that? Well, interestingly, now the experiment runs differently. What happens is, first of all, we recreated with rollbacks. This is where rollbacks are interesting. But what happens, I'll express here a little bit. We see that the next time we run that objective, we check the objective, it wasn't met. It was at 0%. And therefore, it failed the experiment. Great, we've discovered a potential weakness in our system. If this happens, this objective is hurt. So should we put a remediation in place? Is that a priority? Obviously, all those questions are for you to discuss after that. It's for you to make a decision. But at least you've got hard evidence about it now. So if we come back to it here, now we see the 2 runs we had. We had one run, we need to change the scale probably, but we had runs that showed basically that it failed. And if we come back and look for the objectives, what's interesting is we see now the failure in the indicator. And if we scroll that here, we can see that the experiment shows on the red block here, you see that something happened during, and it was a Chaos Toolkit experiment, the Chaos Engineering experiment, it was a verification during that time. So we see the objective result was impacted by that thing here while it was running. So that's pretty interesting because now we can prove that with that verification, we can hurt. Ideally, you want to keep that verification and run that from time to time, or maybe every week or whatever, until it's fixed, until basically it can be proven it's going to break the system. In that case, you keep that as a non-regression. It's not a Chaos Toolkit, the Chaos Engineering experiment anymore. It's more of a non-regression test that you know that you're going to look after that. And if we go to our Slack channel, I know I didn't pay attention to that soon enough, but basically we've got the Chaos Toolkit experiment sent its logs. So we see what happened during the experiment. And then we see the alert as well. That's in that basically send us to that said that the reliably objective was broken. And if we click on the event of the alert, hopefully it's going to open the right window. Yes. we arrive on the alert and we can see it failed. And that's what, we need to pay attention to that. So now we see the three core concepts in action. At this stage, you say, well, okay, you're basically close to a monitoring solution with testing, right? That's not how we perceive it, because what we're trying to do, like I said before, the point is not for you to come to these screens every day. We don't want that. What's more interesting is for us to bring that information to you. How do we do that? Well, Reliably is, first and foremost, even though I spent a bit of time on the UI, a CLI-driven approach. And CLIs have the benefit of being embeddable pretty much wherever you want. So what we can do here, that demo service I'm interested in, I'm going to go to the other one, right? So it's just a simple, basically it's not doing something any fancy. It may have changed the service. Yes, obviously, change the IP. It's not going to work. So it's simply returning that. It's just for demo. It doesn't really matter. Now, what happens if we want to decide if we can deploy a new version when our objective is not healthy? Should we deploy at any rate? It depends. Obviously, if you have a bug fix, a hot fix, you really want to do that. But if you're on a regular, pipeline where you push new things, you may want to sort of make a decision automatically that if my budget is too small, or basically if my objective is not healthy, maybe I don't want to send that to deploy that new version. Or maybe you want to warn another team that you can't deploy another version. So here what we're going to do is, sorry, that's the one. We're going to make a decision here, and we're going to use, I'm going to close this. We're going to use Reliably to make a decision about whether or not we can or not continue on our GitHub actions, so our CI/CD. Now to do that, we use our GitHub action that says, we're going to use the status command. I'll show you that in a minute. The status command is going to say, okay, for a particular objective, look at its current status, its current state, basically. And we make a decision here that if it's not in the right, side of the threshold, basically, we want to fail. And therefore, the CI/CD itself the job is going to fail. So you can decide through objectives, your operations can then bring back, your idea of operations, the way you operate your system, can be folded back into your daily pipelines to make decisions about whether or not you can send something. Obviously, the whole demo here is a bit, trite and trivial, but you can think of more complex scenarios where you have maybe too many PRs under review and you can't push them all. There are many objectives you may want to build to define, okay, we can sustain that one more, or we can't. Maybe you have other ways to decide, too many alerts, or maybe right now we have could set a PagerDuty objective that says no PagerDuty, critical alerts are on. Because that what you could say is basically if we're already on an incident somewhere, and therefore PagerDuty, VictorOps, or Ops, whatever you use is up and running, and someone is on call, should we push something else? And maybe not, because you want to give space and room for the incident to occur and basically get resolved without having more noise coming in and coming over. We can do the same with Chaos Toolkit as well. You could decide to run those things as what we call a safeguard and not run a chaos engineering verification because your SLO is not met. So those become gates for to say, okay, we're not in a state where we can sustain what's going to happen next. So maybe we stay safe and we don't do more. Here we're going to try this. All right, so the right way. I'm going to extend, because it's a demo, I'm going to extend that thing to say, okay, wait for really to force the objective to stay in a bad position for a while. So I'm going to do that. It's going to not be good. And I'm going to change, sorry for that. I'm going to change just the value here. Hello, the world. And because I've got tests, I'm going to change that here and there as well. All right. At that stage, I know that locally, hopefully, my test pass. So as a developer, I'm fairly confident I can push. That's fine. My tests are passing. So why should I? And that's okay. You should, basically. So here we see we are 0. So basically what that means is probably we got a new alert, and we see here we are still waiting for experiment to carry on. Good. Now let's push this thing. Fix message. Don't know if that means fix, but all right, let's push. Good. Now let's go here and let's wait for, see my commit messages are brilliant. Not very nice. All right, so let's wait for that to happen, and let's wait for demo go to happen. But for now, it's been good with me. So the job should start unless GitHub decides to go down. It's why you should probably set an objective on GitHub too, because it's more often than enough down. So it does things. No need to worry too much about the details here. Let's wait for things to happen. All right, so we configure. We'll build the image, which we could have also postponed until we made the decision if we push it. So that could have been done later. All right, now it's going to install dependencies in the build. It's going to run the tests, and sorry for the up and down. Right, it's happy about the linting. Our application is good. All right. And there you go. So you may not see, but it broke before it delivered the new Docker image. So it couldn't push because we made a decision that we got the objectives, and we realized it doesn't have more budget to run because the objective is not healthy. And we can see that right now. We can see that it's, if we go back here, it doesn't have more room to, it's 0. It doesn't have anything. And sadly, the experiment shows when it's finished. We'll work on that. But basically, at some point, we'll show you that there is an experiment run. And therefore, we've made a decision. We can't run that build. Now, it's a bit harsh. Maybe you don't want to do that this way, but it gives you a good idea of what we mean by bringing the information back at you. And that's why we're not asking you to make decisions from the UI. The UI is here to, have a lovely experience of what went wrong, or look at the graphs and blah, blah, blah. And we're going to give you more and more information on. So you will come, but at the end of the day, you'll come probably when things go wrong, right? And you will want to use Reliably from different places so that you can make decisions. You could really say here, instead of breaking the thing here, someone else, let's say demo service is consumed, is a dependency for someone else. It's a dependency for me. I know I depend on demo to be healthy. I could use their objective to make a decision whether or not I can do something. And here I wouldn't break necessarily my build. What I may do is create a GitHub issue, or maybe send a specific message somewhere else in my own team saying, hey, by the way, your dependency is not doing well. This dependency is actually unhealthy. So what do you want to do about it? Maybe it's not a problem. Maybe you want to be alarmed that this team has a problem, either to assemble, for those who've seen Marvel movies, or simply because you don't want to wait for users to start screaming on Twitter that your system is down, because cognitively it's going to be not nice for you. And again, we're all at Reliably, we're all about the teams being in good health, right? At least whatever the conditions. So verification allows you to try different things, but at the end of the day, you really want to be proactive also about what information you need to carry on your own service. So objectives are really for two ways: for you to get information about your own system, your own health, but also to communicate to others, that health. And therefore, others can then make a decision to whether or not they want to action based on how healthy you are. So that's basically how you want to use Reliably. You're going to embed Reliably where you sit. For example, with us, what we do at Reliably, in the core company, we have some tests that run, again, the product in staging. And we had a problem at some point because we're a small team. We really had a problem of decision. What are the components we can push to production? And then we flipped the thing around. We said, we don't push components to production. It's a system, right? So if staging is meant to be a comparable production, except for the data probably, at least from when someone has pushed a new version of their own component service, whatever you call that, they've tested in their PR, they've done all the things. So it's all great. But how is staging reacting to that? So we have a bunch of tests we run regularly against staging. They don't belong to anyone, they belong to everyone. But what we can decide from there is if they're green and we notice a new version happen, why don't we just promote to production immediately? We know the system, not the component, the system as a whole is healthy. So we can push healthily to production in an automated or not fashion. It's a decision for each team, but we can make that decision because objectives told us, okay, we look at what matters. It's a step beyond, not beyond. We sit above monitoring, if you will. We use monitoring. We do need monitoring. We do need observability. We need tracing. We need all those things. But the intelligence that objectives bring you as a concept, it's not Reliably who's created that, right? But as a concept, the objectives allow you to decide, okay, we are going to make a decision about what good looks like, and therefore use that as a mechanism to carry on or stop, basically. So on our side, our team had a problem. How do we decide we can push to production? Well, we simply use objectives to say, okay, we're going to create the right objectives here and there. And those objectives collectively are going to give us an image of the product in staging that we decide can be good enough to push to production. Now, I'm not going to show you that whole thing because it's too complex for the remaining of the demo, but we call that scorecards. A scorecard is a group of objectives. And basically, let's say I'm going to call that demo here. I'm going to put, as many, so I'm going to actually switch on demo. Anything that I want to group as objectives, for example, it could be a business path. For example, we want to add a new thing called Stripe, a new provider, so that you could, if you're using Stripe, you could say how many users are registering every week or whatever, right? A touch of business value into your pipeline. But you could really go from GitHub metrics where you look at number of PRs left open for a given week, number of issues with bugs, or whatever you're looking at, your service running, the latency, and then all the way to business. And you say, okay, all that thing is a pipeline end-to-end for feature X. So we're going to group all of those objectives into one umbrella called a scorecard. And here it's, when we create a scorecard, what you get basically, it's going to take time to compute. But we're going to make, Reliably, the product is going to make a computation of all those objectives and give you a score, basically. Now, that score is for you. We're not creating things for someone to go and hit you on the back, if you will. It's for you to sort of have an idea of, okay, that branch of our product is doing fine or not, because we have enough of objectives in there. And those objectives together give us a good photograph of that specific business path, product, however you shape things, right? It's up to you. But the good thing is scorecards are not meant to be just for that team. It could be someone, looking above that, right? Or on the side, or whatever it is. Maybe you put a scorecard for your dependencies, your direct dependencies. How are they faring, And you can set then alert to a scorecard. Is that computed now? It's going to probably, I don't know if it has. It needs probably to run again. So at some point you'll have a scorecard computed. At some point it's going to compute it. I can't remember exactly when it's going to do that, but it's when that is recorded, you've got 4 letters, A, B, C, D, depending on how the objectives are doing. We compute that on the immediate value of the objective, an historical history of these objectives as well, the scores over a certain period of time. So it's a computation of many factors that gives you an idea of how what is a trend of a particular scorecard, generally speaking. So with that, you can set an alert and then do the thing again, right? But that's interesting because you moved from on objectives, then you can bridge into a scorecard and bring other things that you put in more of a conceptual, value, approach. Basically, it's a different angle. The scorecard is very much about high level, bird's eye view of my system, of a particular business path or journey. And this is what you do. So we started with just objectives that we created for you. You can create, and you will create your own, obviously. We're not owning the truth. You are the expert of your system. We're just bootstrapping you on some of them. And then we moved on, how do we communicate the else of that to the system through alerts and channels? And then we realized, okay, can we be proactive with verification and see when they run, how they impact our objective? And in that case, what are we learning from that? Because that's what matters. Can we put a remediation and then run that again and again and again? And then finally, we realized, well, okay, I've got a bunch of objectives across the board, across the entire system. Can I group them into something else that's going to give me that sensation of that data, that evidence that this particular business path is doing well? What we hope with all of that is that for teams, because they define what good looks like, they set the expectation for everyone else. These are the metric, the indicators that we say are reflecting of our capacity, of our capability, of our sustainability, of our, should I say, happiness, or at least capability to take on more work. So we're not taking away the intelligence of the people. Definitely not. You know your team. We can't pretend otherwise. But what we do is we try to let you encode that in a way you can communicate that as hard evidence to others. Because we think there's beyond your monitoring of services, the main monitoring that matters is how you do as a team. How do you live your life as a team? It's great your system is up and running, but did it, is it running because you work 12 hours a day? Is it running because you put so much effort you can't do the actual thing that you're meant to do? You need to know that and need to export that to others so that you can say, okay, this is where we're at. And not wait until it's too late and someone says, oh, what is happening? Where does this come from? Right? So reliability is in the people. The reliability of the system is in the people making that system. It doesn't happen by magic. It doesn't happen because you're using the cloud. It doesn't happen because you're using a distributed, fancy, Kubernetes cluster with replication all over the place. That is useful. But the real incidents will actually ask you to come. They're not self-healing most of the time. So it's the people dealing with incident. People should care about them, should self-care more way before the incident happens. And Reliably tries to simply put that into a tooling that allows us to set the expectation for everyone and use that as a mechanism to say, okay, stop now or carry on. It's the same idea as SRE in a way, at least the way I understand SRE. Sorry if you have a different view on that, but to me, it's the same idea. But we're not by the book. We're not, again, trying to be an SRE platform. We're not a dashboard for an SRE team. We are a platform for engineers across the board to make a decision about what good looks like for them, how they sustain their work and their, generally speaking, happiness of coming to work. And that's what we're trying to do here with those core concepts, objectives, alerts, verification, and scorecards. All right. At this stage, I think I finished that first demo. I will have more in the future, but I wanted to showcase really the core of the platform. If anybody has questions or if I went too fast, sorry for that. There is a lot here to unpack, so I don't want it to sound like it's a given. So feel free to ask any questions.
So yeah, we have some questions.
Sure.
We wrote them down.
Go ahead.
So one of the questions that I had is the part about the standards that you have, the SLOs that you create. Are these also created in the open SLO standard, or is this something?
So they are very close. It's interesting. You asked a good question. I'm very strong on open standard like that. So yeah, I'm very happy to worry about that, to do that. But we haven't so far because we needed, I think, to focus on the model that we needed for our product. But clearly we are all the way. When we did Chaos Toolkit, we had the Open Chaos standard. We really open the idea. So yes, it's just not done yet, but clearly on the roadmap. Completely happy to work on that.
Okay. And the other question that I had is, I saw that you support Slack, but do you also have support for Teams, Microsoft Teams?
So not yet. Because we don't want to. I think, honestly, initially you dog food a little bit. So because we are using Slack, we went for that quite naturally. But I'm very aware of Teams, power in there. So it's things you don't see are mostly because we haven't worked on them versus we don't know, right?
I just questions like interested, like how can I use it? How can I?
Of course.
And it's SaaS only, I think.
Sorry?
Is the tool itself Reliably? It's only a SaaS offering? Okay.
Yes, for now it is a SaaS. It is a SaaS version, yes.
Okay. Let me take it over because I also have a couple of questions.
Of course.
So I saw the alert. The alert went off at the moment that your service was down. My question is, can you also do an alert where you kind of predict a certain percentage of your error budget is burning? So let's say maybe it's 5% within an hour. If you predict that amount of error budget is gone, and then only alert. Because what we want to prevent is to send an alert to the engineer right away, even though it may be only a little bit of an hiccup in your service.
It's a good. I think it's interesting because we discussed internally just this week and last week actually about different strategies for alert. Mm-hmm. Initially, and we switched that. Initially, we were sending alerts every time you degrade it. So. But that in depth, you could basically end up with quite a lot of alert fatigue because it kept.
That's happening.
So I think different strategies are meant to be created differently because me personally, I like the idea of having once and then nothing until it stops and comes back basically.
Yeah.
But I can appreciate having an alert that happens maybe when really we're training bad, perhaps, or that sort of thing. So. It should be different strategies that we need to encode. So not now, but it's good food for thoughts, definitely, because I do recognize different teams will have, generally speaking, actually, for Reliably, it's the same as with Chaos Toolkit when you come from there. I've always taken the approach that you are your own expert. I can't tell you what to work. I don't want to come and say, you work this way. What I can do is say, okay, we see an opportunity here for improvements or help. We're going to give you the tool, but you adapt it to yourself. With Reliably, it's just because we're newer than Chaos Toolkit, so there are things that aren't there yet. But definitely happy to do that. Yes.
Okay. Well, let me. So, a question about the error budget. Is it also calculated over a period of time? So, by example, I think from Google, the best practice is to calculate it over a period of 28 days, 30 days, something like that. Is that done here as well?
We use a window. So you just define a window. I didn't insist on that, but you define a window indeed, and we use that for everything in the objectives, definitely.
Okay, great. Yeah.
But I didn't. Sorry, I didn't. Insist on that. I could have.
Okay, and the other one, that's something what you can configure. We had about the locking budget so that you cannot deploy. And in some cases, there is just a management decision that you have to deploy a hotfix to fix all the stuff. So if you cannot deploy the hotfix to solve all the reliability issues, you also have an issue in your pipeline. So this is also something.
I had a little question about that as well. I don't know if we have time. We have a lot of questions. Sorry.
I do.
So it was a little bit about the you said a quality gate where you said like, okay, hey, if there's no error budget, but what if there's a situation where you are burning, but you are not through your error budgets yet? Will that also block it?
All right. So in this case, you haven't consumed all your error budgets yet, but you're already aware that it's not, you're too close, or maybe you want to act already. We didn't think of that. It's having that facility to be more. It's very hard, hard line. It's on or off. So it's a good idea. I think it goes back to your strategy of alerting, right? It's don't call me when it's too bad. It's already bad, right? Try to warn me beforehand, right? Let me know as we go down that we are going down. Okay, food for thoughts. Taking notes on that.
Yeah. And I like the scorecard mechanism to combine them, because we also have, we already had idea about, we have teams. We have, by the way, SLOs for every team, but we have to calculate them also over the teams. So we currently use Dynatrace with I saw the integration you had. So we create also SLOs in Dynatrace for the overall part. But these scorecards are good. But can you also create them by APIs or CLI?
Yeah, so not the CLI. I think right now that's usually the CLI grows as we see fit. But because it's all API driven, we all I'm very much into, at the end, a bit like a G-Cloud command where the entire API is drivable by your CLI. So completely. Actually, just a note on the Dynatrace integration. We do two things, and I think on that, and Sean may help me if I'm making a mistake here, but we, on Datadog, basically on systems that already have an SLO concept, like Datadog or Dynatrace or other bits and pieces that we could support, we offer you either you give us a query, or we can mirror basically those SLOs. So if you created already a database of SLOs there, what we'll do is basically we import them into Reliably so that they exist on two systems, just to make it easier, basically.
That also looks correct.
Yeah, because at the moment we have SLOs at two different locations. So Dynatrace is more for the front end, and we have Prometheus alerts more for the back end service.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it would be a good point to consolidate there.
Still some questions?
Yeah, let me see if we
other questions. Otherwise, we're taking all the time.
No, I guess we're through. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. And
very nice demo.
I appreciated that. Thank you very much. I'm happy it didn't break in a way. On Chaos Toolkit, it was nice when I did demo, because I could always say Chaos Engineering.
It could always break.
It sort of broke, but it's not what I wanted. So fair enough. Thank you very much for you two for the questions. Anyone else has any question they would like to ask? Or I can read them from, obviously, from the chat. Right. While people look up for their unmute button. Right. What are the next features of Reliably? So it's a good one. This basically, I think we sort of take an approach of GitHub here, where GitHub, if you were there at the beginning, was all about getting the code online and being able to socially work on the code. So that's a core. 15 years on, the core is still there. It's still the same. So it's what we're trying to reproduce here. Our core was the thing, what are the things I've shown you. And from there, we're going to obviously listen to feedback like you just gave us. But also we have ideas around, you saw at some point a very small graph of things connected to each other. It's because internally we actually link, you've seen objectives, but we know more than that. And we basically create entities internally and we link them in the graph, basically. And from that graph, we're going to be able to walk that graph So you could say, hey, this objective is not doing good, walk that graph and see if there is another thing depending on, well, linked to that, and go and do something about that thing. So the graph is going to become much more used in the future. So that's a big one. Obviously, more integrations. Obviously, let us know what you need, because that's a right way of doing it. And another question: how to sign up? Well, you can sign up basically on, like I said, on the reliably.com. You can sign up. If you do need something else than GitHub and GitLab, let us know as well, because obviously it's not easy. There are so many SAML auth providers these days that supporting all of them is really a bit of work. So we support GitHub and GitLab for now, but let us know if you need something else like Okta or Google, basically, or something different. We'll be happy to look into that. All right, it's at the top of the hour. If there is no more questions, I'll be happy to answer any more of them. Send an email to hello@reliably.com, and we'll be happy to take that from there. But thank you very much for staying during the demo and during my endless talk. I hope you liked it, and I hope to see you soon on Reliably, obviously. All right. Thank you very much all. Have a good afternoon.